My name is Shannon Brixner, and I will be presenting on the Victorian Gothic Revival and the Victoria Terminus in Mumbai. The location of the Victoria Terminus. So the Terminus is a train station located in Maharashtra, India, in the city of Mumbai. When the terminus was constructed in 1888, it was located in the city Bombay, which was renamed Mumbai in 1995 after the goddess Mumba, so that Indian culture and history could be honored through the name of the city and not be reminiscent of British colonialism, which was the source of the city's original name, Bombay. While the Victoria Terminus was constructed in what was then known as Bombay, it is now currently located in Mumbai. The state of Maharashtra is the second most densely populated state in India, and Mumbai is the most populous city in India, representing its role as a nucleus of commerce, business, and culture, which is significant to architecture and the Victoria Terminus and the role it plays in such an urban and densely populated city. So the map on the left is a map of Mumbai and shows the Victoria Terminus at point B. And the map on the right is a map of India showing where Mumbai is located, which is on the west coast. The location of the Victoria Terminus in 19th century Bombay. This is another map showing the location of the terminus in Mumbai. It's from 1909 and shows the location of the terminus about 20 years after the completion of its construction, which puts the location of the terminus into context within the time period it was built in. And you can see the arrow points to where the terminus is located. Urban and architectural circumstances in Bombay. So under the rule of the British, Bombay was a city marked by stark class separations due to colonialism. And imperialism deepened the divide between races, and white Europeans often occupied the South, whereas the native Indians were forced north of the fortified town built by the British. And once this fort was torn down by Governor Frere, these divisions remained despite some movement between classes. And over time, it's discussed in Mumbai Fables by Gayan Prakash. Class divisions took precedence over racial divisions as some Indians began to build businesses and accumulate wealth under the British system. However, they both remained very pressing issues within this system. And the city developed by the British in southern Bombay was reminiscent of Britain and was not considered exotic or different at all by the British who lived there. And those two photos are examples of the British architecture in India and how it looked a lot like Britain and didn't look unfamiliar to them. Prior to the British construction of the terminus and development of Gothic architecture in Bombay, the most important buildings were constructed in a neoclassical style. And this includes the Mint, which was completed in 1829, and the Town Hall, which was completed in 1833. And both of these structures were located nearby the terminus, slightly south of it in the city plan. However, the architecture and urban structure of Bombay began to change as it grew as an urban area. And Governor Frere, a British colonial administrator, he took some of the neo-Gothic trends. He was very impressed by them, and he began to dispatch them from Britain to India, although price was a major barrier to completing the projects that he envisioned for Bombay. And during his time as governor, Frere tore down the walls of the fort surrounding the town and developed the railroads throughout India. So he oversaw many infrastructure and architecture projects. And the terminus was built during what Christopher London dubbed the climax of Bombay Gothic. And it was built in the time that Bombay had become a major urban center. So the Mint and the Town Hall are two examples of the neoclassical architecture of Bombay. And you can see elements of that, such as the large columns in the front. Prior to the Victoria Terminus, there were different experiments with neo-Gothic architecture. So the first two experiments were Sir G.G. Boy Hospital and the Grant Medical College, so both medical facilities. And then in the 1840s, two churches were erected in India, St. Paul's Cathedral in Calcutta and the Afghan Memorial Church in Bombay, which is pictured on the right. And both of these projects were examples of early Gothic architecture in Mumbai. And the Afghan church was one of the most significant Gothic projects in Bombay. And it set a precedent for the later Victorian buildings in India, despite not being exceedingly notable in its style. The church is located south of the terminus, and it was a catalyst for further neo Gothic developments. It was just one of the early prototypes almost. And another key architectural example of Gothic architecture in Bombay is the Secretariat, which is pictured on the left, which was constructed a few years prior to the terminus. And this building was another large building meant for offices and businesses and was located south of the terminus at a walkable distance. And at the time of the construction of the Victoria terminus, Bombay was prospering and had already begun a neo-Gothic architectural movement. So the significance of the terminus in history, the urban history and architectural history of Bombay, as well as in Gothic architecture, it is referred to by Philip Davies in Splendors of the Raj as the finest Victorian Gothic building in India. And the terminus has certain features that make it stand out from other Gothic structures from this period of time. And this helps to define the specific neo-Gothic style of Bombay. For example, the masonry dome, designed by architect Frederick William Stevens, was a unique element that was not commonly seen in neo-Gothic architecture. And it's seen in both of these photos. And you can see that it was really like the focal point of the structure. And it was also the first of its kind, because this was not commonly seen in neo-Gothic architecture. The terminus itself was partially a tribute to the School of Art, and overall was just an incredibly significant building in India due to its size as well as its function, which represented the magnitude of India's railways and how they connected the whole region. And in the book Bombay Gothic, Christopher London states that the terminus represents the dominance of the railroad system over the wealth of Bombay. So overall, the terminus just represents the engineering and architectural prowess of Bombay.
I will first talk about the way and the reason Gothic Revival architecture developed in Britain. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans discovered the possibility of restoring classical architecture, but this possibility was only hinted at. When the British chose to build Gothic-style buildings for historical sentiment, the romanticism unique to these buildings emerged. People were highly eager to gaze Gothic romanticism and loved its mystery. Thus began the Gothic Revival. The origins of the Gothic Revival can be traced back to Horace Walpole's Strawberry Hill, or Fonthill Abbey, designed by James Watt. The building blends with its natural surroundings and has a distinctive reason when photographed from any angle, creating a romantic atmosphere. Fonthill Abbey's combination of picturesque, which is the term used to describe a landscape or building that reflected the romantic view of the past as portrayed, and classical structures became a crucial guiding factor in developing the subsequent Gothic revival. Another architect who combined picturesque and classical elements was Sir Charles Barry, who designed the famous House of Parliament in London. Unlike Fonthill Abbey, the House of Parliament in London was the first substantial public building of the Gothic Revival. The design of the House of Parliament in London also echoes Fonthill Abbey's concept of integration with the landscape. It is like a node connecting the old Renaissance English social architecture with the beginning of the Gothic Revival movement. Barry chose the vertical Gothic style to represent a sense of order and stability. From the pictures, the corbels and windows are generally orderly, and the towers and rise times do not disrupt the order and make the entire facade more vibrant. The windows and columns allow for organic fragmentation of the walls, showing a remarkable visual and structural homogeneity. Sir George Gilbert Scott was a follower of Pugin, who built the famous St. Pancras station adjacent to the pedestrian side. William Henry Barlow built the station shed and platforms. The freestanding windows and doors, the use of materials, and the design of the roof are all indicative of the Gothic style. Its combination of practicality brought the Gothic revival to a climax. St. Pancras railway station has always been functional and aesthetically pleasing, both in the past and present. The design of St. Pancras railway station was later borrowed from the Victorian Terminus in India and is undoubtedly a masterpiece of the Gothic revival. After this, John Ruskin published The Seven Lamps of Architecture, which influenced many later architects, such as Butterfield's use of multiple colors and patterns. It also helped to promote the Gothic revival in England. The Victorian Memorial was completed entirely in 1924 and was the first part of an ambitious urban plan for London at the time. At the top of the central tower stands a gilded bronze Victory, standing on a globe, holding the victor's palm in one hand. Below the statue are the enthroned statue of Queen Victoria and her mother, and statues of justice and truth, constancy and courage. The erection of the Victorian monument represents the complete end of the Victorian era. The Victorian era was the period of the culmination of the Industrial Revolution and the economic and cultural heyday of England. At that time, the Gothic revival reached its zenith. The significant influence of the Gothic revival on England in the 18th and 19th centuries can be seen in the Victorian monuments and the countless Gothic revival-style buildings. This influence had nothing to do with religion. It was a love of architectural style, with a touch of sadness in its love. The Gothic revival gradually became dogmatic in the 19th century and lost its essence, restoration, and prosperity. The Gothic revival was initially a break with classicism, a quest for spiritual freedom. But as time went on, this feeling faded. However, there is no doubt that the products of the Victorian Gothic revival, those buildings, persisted. There are three main differences between Gothic church architecture and the Gothic revival. The first is the pronounced difference in the date. Gothic church buildings were primarily built in the 12th and 13th centuries, while the Gothic revival began in the 18th and 19th century. The differences in time set a tone that is unlikely to be entirely similar between the two. The difference in time leads to a second difference: the initial purpose and form in which they occurred. The architects of the French royal dominions had always tried to emphasize structural articulation. They, therefore, adopted a skeletal system on the way to building churches, building high enough by the thrust of the vaults and the weight of the roofs and walls. And Gothic church architecture was thus used extensively in churches. However, the Gothic revival was mainly due to the urban development of Mumbai and the nostalgia of British architects. So, the Gothic revival style was used not only for churches but also for other infrastructures. The third difference is that Gothic church architecture has a different meaning than Gothic revival. Gothic church architecture symbolizes the breaking of the soul's bond, a new kind of architecture born after Romanesque architecture that allows people to glimpse the divinity. There was an original creative passion behind it, and that left unique ideas for future generations. On the other hand, the Gothic revival focuses on combining classical Gothic style and modern material technology. In addition, the Gothic revival focused primarily on the relationship with Romanticism on one side. Therefore, it is probably inferior to Gothic church architecture in terms of both ideological and historical value. The significance of the Gothic revival in England is complicated to judge. Some say that the Gothic revival was only a veneer of the Gothic style. There is no element of revival at all. The architects implemented their architectural ideas when they applied to some of the decorative techniques of the Gothic style. The Gothic style itself, with its particular practicality and adaptability to local conditions, is not well used. However, the Gothic revival in England is undoubtedly significant in the change of interest from Clarke's The Gothic Revival, an essay in the history of taste. At least the architecture left behind by the Gothic Revival is meaningful. The classic Gothic style contained a sense of fun that didn't fit into the 19th century English environment. The tedious carving techniques and hands-on interest of the architects were not present in 19th century England. Nevertheless, the Gothic revival undeniably changed the face of England. New and restored churches dotted the England countryside. Gothic banks and department stores, Gothic inns and insurance companies filled towns and cities, and Gothic styles of all kinds were ubiquitous. This can also be seen in the St. Pancras railway station, where Gothic architecture of the Gothic revival was not only limited to churches anymore. Even if the essence of the Gothic style and its interest cannot be found in it, its form and spirit of freedom can still be felt in these buildings. The impact of the Gothic revival on Mumbai, and indeed on India, was enormous. The first Gothic revival building was the Afghan Memorial Church, founded by Henry Carnegie and Bartle Frey, which made an excellent start for the Gothic revival in India. With the start of the American Civil War, the demand for the cotton trade increased substantially. Mumbai proliferated as a hub for trade in cotton. It became a little gem set in the sea. Along with the economy and trade growth, the demand for land and population in Mumbai increased dramatically. Then the demand for buildings and architects rose. Mumbai, still after British rule, was home to many British architects who taught at the Sir James G. Bahol School of Art and wanted to spread the Gothic revival style, a combination of English and French in India. T. Roger Smith's European style, George Gibber's Indo-Saracenic style all became popular in Mumbai, India. The greater city of Bombay was largely made in the neo-Gothic style. The Gothic revival reached its peak with Bombay's architect F. W. Stevens. He designed the Victorian Terminus, the Bombay Municipal Corporation building, and so on. With the death of Stevens, eclecticism took root, and the Gothic revival fell into obscurity. It is clear from this that the Gothic revival had a significant impact on India and Bombay. The development of the city of Bombay went hand in hand with the Gothic revival. Although the Gothic revival gradually fell into obscurity, the extensive public facilities, with still slightly different styles but general concepts, still show us the splendid mark left by the Gothic revival in Bombay. Moreover, the Gothic revival in India was not merely a continuation of the English or French Gothic revival, but a fusion of the foreign Gothic revival style with the local environment and the local culture, resulting in a new architectural culture.